Good day everyone. Today, we're going to discuss about variation. Ano nga ba ang variation? It is defined by any change in some quantity due to change in another. We have four types of variation. We have direct variation, inverse variation, joint variation, and combined variation. Let us first discuss direct variation. If the ratio between two quantities is constant, then the two quantities is indirect variation. So kapag daw ang ratio ay constant, direct variation siya. And an increase in one variable causes an increase in the other variable. Similarly, a decrease in one variable causes a decrease in the other variable. Ano ang ibig sabihin nito? Kapag daw ang isang variable or isang quantity ay nag-increase, ano ang mangyayari dun sa isa pang quantity? Yes, tama, mag-i-increase din. So, pag tumaas ang isa, tataas din ang isa. Or, kapag nag-decrease or bumaba yung isa, ano ang mangyayari dun sa isa pa? Bababa din. And, kapag i-ginrap natin ang mga quantities or yung mga given na values under direct variation, its graph is a straight line. The statements y varies directly as x, y is directly proportional to x, y is proportional to x can be translated mathematically as y equals kx or k equals y over x, where k is the constant of variation. So kapag pinag-usapan na natin ang equation ng direct variation, meron tayong dalawang option. Is either y equals kx or k is equals to y over x. Magkakaroon tayo ng another variable which is letter k, and this is the constant of variation. So ibig sabihin, lagi natin gagamitin yung value, yung k. So lagi natin gagamitin yung letter k as representation ng constant of variation. So alin dito sa dalawa ang karaniwan kong ginagamit? Yung y equals kx. Later, malalaman niyo kung bakit. So let's have some applications in real life. We have the income of a worker earning per day varies directly as the number of days he works. Ibig sabihin, ang sweldo daw or yung sahod ng isang manggagawa ay nakadepende sa number ng araw or sa bilang ng araw ng kanyang pinagtrabaho. So tama naman. So pag maraming araw siyang ipinasok, mas marami siyang sweldo or mas malaki ang kanyang kita. So kapag hindi siya pumasok, ibig sabihin wala siyang kikitain. Another example is the fare of a passenger varies directly as the distance of his destination, which is true. Ang pamasahe ay nakadepende sa distance or layo ng biyahe mo. So halimbawa, kung ang biyahe lang natin ay maiksi lang, so meron lang tayong specific na pamasahe para doon. At kapag iyan ay lumagpas na or lumayo, syempre mas mahal ang babayaran natin sa pamasahe. Okay, so what if i-convert natin ito into mathematical equations using k as the constant of variation? So gagamit tayo ng mga letters. Unahin natin yung first situation. The income of a worker earning per day varies directly as the number of days he works. So piliin natin, alamin natin yung mga quantities na pwede nating i-represent na letters. So ang una dyan ay income of a worker. So i-represent natin siya as letter I, as income, and the number of days. And i-represent natin siya as letter D. So meron tayong dalawang variable dyan, which is I for the income and D for the number of days. So, ang clue word lang natin, kapag meron tayong statement for variation, hanapin natin yung mga clue words. Kung naalala nyo kanina, meron tayo ditong varies directly. So, dun pa lang sa clue word na varies directly, it means this is under direct variation. So, kapag inire-write natin siya into equation, we have I equals KD, which is the first equation dun sa pinresent natin kanina na equation ng direct variation. I stands for the income since yun ang unang binanggit, equals K is the constant of variation, and then D for the number of days kung ano yung huling binanggit. And that's it. Yun na yung kanyang equation. How about the second situation? The fare of a passenger varies directly as the distance of his destination. So the clue word, varies directly. It means this is under direct variation. So ano-ano ang mga kailangan natin? Nakita nyo ba? Very good. Fare of a passenger. So i-represent natin yung fare of a passenger as F and the distance of his destination as D. Siyempre, yung fare ay nakadepende sa distance. Kapag mahaba ang distance or kapag mas malayo, mas mahal ang pamasahe. So, let us give the equation. We have F equals KB. F represents the fare of a passenger. Siya ang unang isusulat since fare of a passenger ang unang binanggit sa sentence. Equals K, which is the constant of variation, and D is the distance of his destination. And that's it. Now, proceed tayo sa inverse variation. So, kung sa direct variation natin kanina, the ratio is constant, sa inverse variation, the product between two quantities is constant. So, yung product naman nila ang constant. And, kung kanina sa direct variation, pag nag-increase yung isa, mag-i-increase din yung isa. Sa inverse variation, hindi. Baliktad naman. An increase in one variable causes a decrease in the other variable. So, kapag nag-increase daw yung isa, bababa ang isa. Or, kapag nag-decrease naman yung isa, what will happen to the other variable? Mag-i-increase naman siya. So, baliktad yung nangyayari. And each graph is neither a straight line nor a parabola. So, pag ginrap natin ang inverse variation, hindi siya straight line katulad ng direct variation. Hindi rin siya parabola, but a half of a two-part curve known as the hyperbola. So, ganito ang itsura ng graph ng inverse variation. So, meron din tayong mga clue words. Ano yung mga clue words natin? So, we have the following statements. Y varies inversely as X. Y is inversely proportional to X. So, ang clue words natin, varies inverse and inversely proportional. So, this can be written or translated mathematically as K equals YX or Y equals K over X, where K is the constant of variation. So, meron tayong two equations. So, kung ako yung gagawa, usually ito yung karaniwan kong ginagamit. So, ano-ano yung mga applications? So, naglagay tayo dito ng isa. The number of persons needed to do a job varies inversely as the number of days to finish the job. So, ibig sabihin, kapag mas maraming tao ang gagawa, mas konti yung time or yung araw para matapos yung trabaho. Pero kapag kakaunti yung tao na gagawa, mas matagal matapos ang trabaho. So, that is one example of inverse variation. Now, let us rewrite or translate these statements into mathematical equations using K as the constant of variation. So, clue word natin, varies inversely. So, it means this is under inverse variation. So, ang mga quantities na kailangan natin, number of persons needed, so bilang ng tao, and number of days to finish the job or bilang ng araw para matapos yung trabaho. So, i-represent natin yung number of persons. Since parehas namang number yan, number of person, number of days, i-represent natin yung number of persons as letter P. Okay, so kung kayo ang pipili ng letter, so hanggat maaari, malapit dun sa word. Okay, so kung person siya, so i-represent natin siya as P. At kung days, i-represent natin as D. Pwede naman kayong gumamit ng ibang letter as long as kaya nating i-justify. Halimbawa, let X be the number of persons or let Y be the number of days. Pwede naman yun. So, the equation for this situation is P is equals to K over D. So, P for the number of persons equals K, which is the constant of variation. Denominator ang number of days. And that's it. So, kung naalala nyo kanina sa direct variation, hindi fraction ang sagot sa equation. Pero kapag inverse variation, fraction form tayo. Next, joint variation. It is the relationship between three or more variables where one variable varies directly as the product of two or more variables. So, ang joint variation is actually direct variation. The difference is, mas marami ng variables dito compared sa direct. Sa direct variation, ang pinag-uusapan lang natin ay two variables or two quantities. But in joint variation, it's more than two variables. So, let's have the statement. Ano yung clue word natin? Varies jointly. Pwede rin naman varies directly. Tapos, ang kasunod ay two variables. Wala namang problema doon. Okay? Pero usually, pag varies jointly, yun talaga ang for joint variation. Kasi nandun na yung word na joint. And this can be translated mathematically as A equals K BC or K equals A over BC. So, meron tayo again na two equations where K is the constant of variation. And usually, ang ginagamit ko na equation ay this one. Okay, some applications tayo. The area of a rectangle varies jointly as its length and width. So, ibig sabihin, yung area nakadepende sa dalawang variable which is the length and the width. And that is under joint variation. Kasi meron na tayong 3 variables dito. Okay, so paano naman siya i-rewrite into equation using K as the constant of variation? So, hanapin muna natin ang mga kailangan nating i-represent. First one is the area of the rectangle. So, pwede natin siya i-represent as A kasi area. And then, the other two variables which is length and width, pwede natin i-represent si length as L and width as W. The clue word is varies jointly. So, which means the equation for this situation is A equals K times L times W, where K is the constant of variation. And that's it. Now, let's have combined variation. This is the kind of variation that involves both the direct and inverse variation. So, ibig sabihin, pag sinabi natin na combined, kaya nga siya word na combined, pinagsamang direct and inverse. So, it means sa isang statement, may makikita na kayo na direct and inverse variation. So, magay tayo ng statement, Z varies directly as X and inversely as Y. So, tingnan nyo yung statement natin. Meron na kayong clue word na varies directly at meron pa tayong makikita na inversely. So, it means dalawang variation ang pinagsama natin. Isang direct at isang inverse. And that is now combined variation. And this can be translated mathematically as Z equals KA over B. Okay, so Z equals K, which is the constant of variation. Yung direct, tingnan nyo mabuti ha, yung word na directly or varies directly, siya yung kasama ng K, nakamultiply sa K sa numerator, at ang inversely, ang ilalagay niya sa denominator. So, let's have some applications in real life. The pressure of a gas varies directly as its temperature and inversely as its volume. So, tingnan natin yung ating mga clue words. Varies directly, meron. And then, hindi nagtapos dyan, meron din tayong word na inversely. So, it means dalawang variation ang pinagsama. So, ibig sabihin ito ay under combined variation. Now, hanapin natin yung mga variables na pwede nating magamit. Una, pressure of a gas. So, pressure, i-represent natin siya as P. And then, temperature, letter T. And the volume, which is letter V. So, usually, ang ginagamit natin na letter, so kung ako yung gagawa, karaniwan ginagamit ko yung first letter ng word. So, tulad ng sinabi ko kanina, you can use any letter. Wala namang problema doon. So, which means the equation for this situation is using K as the constant of variation. P stands for the pressure of the gas. Since varies directly, so equals K times T, or varies directly as its temperature. So, kasama siya ng T na sa numerator kasi nandun yung word na direct. At saan ilalagay kapag may word na inverse? Very good, sa denominator. Since inversely as its volume, so yung volume ang nasa denominator. And that's it. So far, yun lang muna tayo about variation. Thank you for listening.